This is Dustin with Blazing Star Gardens. We're a greenhouse in Minnesota that grows native plants. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use our garden design tool to create a native pollinator garden. We created this garden tool both for beginners and experts. You'll be designing with beautiful pollinator plants that are native to North America. When you design with native plants, you never have to wonder if you're planting the right thing. All of these plants help pollinators in some way, even the grasses. You can usually only find them at nurseries that specialize in native plants, such as Blazing Star Gardens. If you're just learning about native plants, there are a ton of resources in this design tool to help you learn about native plants and how to choose the right plants for your garden. If you're more advanced, you can jump right in and start creating a garden design. You need a desktop or a laptop to use this garden tool. It won't work on a smartphone or tablet. If you don't have a computer, I recommend sketching it out on a piece of paper using the resources on the design tool, and going to your local library and using their computer to put it together and print it out. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to open our garden design tool and save it so that you can start editing it. I'll also show you how to add plants, garden shapes, and any landscape elements you want to include, such as a house or a sidewalk or a deck. After I explain the resources, I'll walk you through a garden design where you can see how everything works. It will also explain some of my thought process when designing a garden. This is a really useful design tool because it uses mini illustrations of the plants to show you exactly how big the plants are and what they look like when they're in bloom. When you finish your design, please share it on social media and help spread the word about this useful resource. The first thing we'll do is open the garden design tool on blazingstargardens.com. After you get to blazingstargardens.com, click on the Design a Pollinator Garden tool on the top menu bar. After that, click on the link to open the garden design tool. Once you have it open, you'll notice that it's actually a Google slideshow. There's two main parts to this design program. There's a slide where you'll create your garden design, and there's also resource slides that will help you choose the right plant for the right location, such as dry or wet, shade or sun. There are also bloom charts that are really useful for choosing plants that bloom at the same time and give you the color combinations you might want. But first, you'll need to save this program so that you can edit it. If you skip this step, you won't be able to create a garden design. If you have a Google account already, you can go to File, Make a Copy, Entire Presentation. This will make a copy of this design tool in your own Google Drive. It'll take a few moments to save. Once it's saved, you can start editing it. To find your garden design in the future, you can go to Gmail and click on the little dots next to your username. Then you can open Google Drive, which is where your garden design program will be. If you don't have a Google account and you don't want to make one, you'll need to download it as a PowerPoint. So again, you go up to File, then Download, and click on Microsoft PowerPoint. I recommend using this program on Google Slides if you can, because the hot links only work in Google Slides, and the links for the plants also only work in Google Slides. These are useful because they show you pictures of each plant, and if you click on the link, it'll bring you to our website to give you a lot more details and a lot more pictures. Now that you have it saved, we're ready to get started. This garden design tool was created in Google Slides, but it's not a slideshow. It's just a good program to create visual designs. The table of contents will show you where the garden design page is. There is only one page in this program where you will create your garden design, and the rest of the pages are resources. The table of contents will also show you where the resources are located, such as garden design basics, garden examples, sun or shade, dry or wet, and the bloom charts. The first thing we'll do is go to the design slide. You can also navigate with the thumbnails on the left. Once you get to the garden design page, you'll notice a blank grid where you'll design your garden. You can also change the title of the garden. Now we're going to add a garden shape. You can add a garden shape from our pre-made garden page, or you can add your own. I'm going to add my own. I'll go up to Insert, Line, and then Scribble to draw a shape. and I'm just going to do a basic circle. Whenever you're designing a garden, you need to think about scale. All of our plants and this grid are already scaled to this 15-foot section. And each of these blocks represents about 1 foot by 1 foot. If I want my garden to be 10 feet wide, let's say, I need to count 10 blocks wide and then resize my garden shape. If you hold Shift while you resize an object, it won't distort the shape. Now I have it resized so that it's 10 feet wide by about 10 feet high. You don't need to resize the plants when you add them, as long as your garden fits within this 15-foot grid. For example, prairie phlox is about 1.5 feet tall. The shorter plants, like passflower, are just under a foot tall. You can see that they fit right inside that 1 by 1 grid, about what they're like in real life. Tall plants, such as yellow coneflower, are well over 3 feet tall. The scale isn't perfect, but it gives you a good idea of how big and what shape these plants are, and how they fit in with each other. When you actually plant your garden, I recommend planting shorter species about 1 foot apart, and waist-high species about 15 inches apart. That spacing can be hard to show on this grid, and instead, I recommend making a rough layout and just planting everything about 1 foot apart on planting day. We have all of the plants off to the right-hand side of the design. You might have to scroll over to see them, depending on how big your screen is. Having them over here makes it easier to add them. They're organized in 2 ways. We have the sun plants on the top and the shade plants on the bottom, and within these groups, they're organized by height. To add plants to your garden, you can highlight both the plant and the text and drag it into your garden. To highlight both the plant and the text, click your mouse outside of the image and drag it over both. You can also right-click and press Copy. But you'll notice if you right-click and try to paste it in Google Slides, it will make you use hotkeys to paste. So you need to hold Ctrl and V to paste, and then move that into your garden. I usually put it underneath as a legend and add some quantities later too. You can also copy something by pressing Ctrl and C, and then pasting it by pressing Ctrl and V. If you click on the text, it'll give you links to our website. This will show you pictures of the plants and other details, such as whether they like sun, what kind of soil they like, when they bloom, and how much they spread. Next, we're going to copy and paste them into our design. You can use the hotkeys such as Ctrl and C to copy and Ctrl and V to paste. Or another nice tip is to hold the Control key while you move a plant, and it will create a copy. If you ever find that a plant is blocking another plant, you can reorder it by right-clicking, pressing Order, and sending it backward. You might have to do it a few times until it finally gets behind the plant or landscape element that you want it to get behind. You can also do the reverse by clicking Order and bringing it forward. This design tool has garden shapes that you can add to your design, different landscape elements such as trees or sidewalks or fences. It also has another important slide called the Design a Plant slide. This is necessary because we couldn't possibly draw all the native plants in North America, so you'll have to use some of your own creativity to make the plants that are native to your area. I'll show you how to make a plant. Say for example, I want blue mist flower in my design, but it isn't on this design tool, so I have to make it myself. I'd go to Google and look for pictures of mist flower. I'd look especially at the leaf shape and the plant shape, and I would also look at the shape and colors of the flowers. Then back on the design tool, I'd try to find the plant shape that most closely resembles mist flower. I'm going to copy it here. I noticed that Miss Flower was shorter, so I'm going to resize it. I noticed it had little purple flowers, so I'm going to add a few of these purple flowers. This isn't exactly what Miss Flower looks like, but we're just trying to make it close enough. After I recreate it as closely as I can, I'll highlight each piece of it, then right-click, and click on Group. That will make all these shapes stay together. From there, I can copy it and paste it back in my design. Remember to resize it according to the 15-foot scale. We also have slides that explain some garden design basics. We also included some examples of finished garden designs. One is a shady front yard design, and one is a sunny backyard design. We also have some slides with the exact same plants as the garden design slide, but in order of the scientific name, for those of you who might know plants better. After that, there are slides that show whether the plants like to grow in dry or well-drained soil, or if they can handle some wet soil or soil that doesn't drain as quickly. The next slide shows how much plant spread in gardens based on our own experience. I'll explain it quickly because it's an important part of garden design. Some native plants stay in clumps and barely spread. Other plants spread a lot, either by roots or by seed. If you're planting a short front yard or boulevard garden, you might only want short plants that only spread a little, so you'd choose plants more towards the top. If you're planting a tall garden, you might be okay with big plants that eventually spread everywhere and help keep the weeds at bay, and you might want to choose plants toward the bottom. You might be tempted to plant some of the tall spreading plants like New England aster or wild bergamot as a backdrop to shorter plants, but you'll have to do a lot of extra weeding to pull the seedlings out, or they'll eventually overwhelm the shorter plants. Other pages show which plants can handle clay. These plants can handle more dry clay at the top, and these plants can handle wetter clay. We also have companion plant slides, which show plants that we like to group together. Companion plants usually bloom around the same time and have complementary colors. The bloom charts are also helpful for designing a garden because you want to see which plants bloom at the same time so that you can put them together. And in any garden, you also want plants blooming at all times of the year. You want at least 2 or 3 plants that bloom in spring. You want a few plants that bloom in summer. And you also want a few species that bloom in fall. We also have a slide with instructions on how to plant a garden. This is just a summary of the steps that we do when we install a garden. And if you go to our website, you'll find a more comprehensive installation guide with some pictures. You don't have to follow every one of these steps, but you might be happier with the results if you do. At the very bottom are the garden designs from our pre-made garden kits that we sell on our website. You can use these as a starting point for your own garden or see how we group plants together. Sometimes we do a natural design where the plants are more interspersed, and sometimes we do a more traditional design where the plants are in groups together. Next, I'm going to walk you through making a garden design for a sunny site. First, I'm going to add a garden shape. Then I'm going to add a sidewalk. I'll use the Control and C hotkeys to copy and paste. If you need to rotate something, you can grab this little dot and rotate it sideways. I'll also change the order so it isn't blocking my garden shape. When you're designing a garden, one of the best pieces of advice is to put short plants on the border and taller plants in the middle or back. If your garden is bordering a path or a sidewalk, you'll need really short plants, usually under 1.5 feet tall, because most plants at some point will flop over. If you plant a 2 or 3 foot tall plant along the border, you can assume that at some point it's going to flop over 2 or 3 feet into the sidewalk or a path. You want to err on the safe side and choose shorter plants for the border. One of the border plants I really like is prairie smoke. This is a pretty adaptable plant in different soils. I personally like to mix plants up a little bit, but if you want, you can also put them in more traditional groupings. It is nice to have a little repetition in the garden though, and to put the same plants in different spots. Another plant I like is prairie phlox. These are all sunny plants for our sunny site. Prairie phlox blooms in May and June. I'm going to add a little lawn back here too. Butterfly milkweed is my favorite milkweed. It stays in a clump and doesn't spread by roots. It doesn't take over a garden like common milkweed does, but it still supports caterpillars. Butterfly milkweed blooms about at the same time as prairie phlox, so it's a good companion plant. Okay, I have some spring blooming plants with the prairie smoke. I also have some early summer plants with the prairie phlox and butterfly milkweed. Now I'm going to look for late summer blooming plants. So I'll go to the bloom chart to find out what might work. I'll scroll to the slide with July and August plants. Since this garden is next to a sidewalk, I want to have mostly shorter plants and nothing too tall because it's kind of a small garden. I see that lead plant is a nice plant that blooms in midsummer. I also noticed that purple prairie clover does as well, and that looks pretty short. I could copy them from here, but I'll go back to the design page and find them there. Lead plant is a little bit bigger, so I'm only going to plant a couple of those. Purple prairie clover is a bit shorter, so it will be nice on the borders. I do want some grasses, and I know that prairie dropseed is a nice clump grass that doesn't spread too much and stays in a small mound. I'll put a few of those in there. I also know that sedges are nice to have in gardens because they start greening up right after the snow melts, while everything else is still brown. Parasol sedge is a short, sunny sedge that doesn't flop over after it blooms, so it's one of my favorite sedges. It's good for borders too. Usually when I create a design, I start to add so many grasses that it starts looking a little too crowded, even though the grasses are really just an underlayer for the flowers. So what I'll do is I'll make 2 separate designs, one with just the flowers and one with just the grasses. You can keep these in one design if you want. When I actually plant the garden, I'll usually plant the grasses first, and then I'll go back through and plant the flowers in between the grasses. Okay, I have some summer blooming plants, and now I need some fall blooming plants. I'll go back to the bloom chart. I'm going to look for plants that bloom in August and September. First, I'll choose orange coneflower. This one blooms in August and a little bit into September, and it has that classic yellow black-eyed Susan look. Last, I'm going to choose a late blooming flower. Asters are nice, but asters usually spread a little bit. Sky blue aster and New England aster spread a lot by seed, and they're a little too tall for this sidewalk situation. So instead what I think I'll do is I'll choose bottle gentian, which doesn't bloom as late as the asters, but it does have some late season colors. Now I'll go back to the garden design, and I'm going to find orange coneflower and bottle gentian. When I design a garden, I basically plant everything 1 foot apart, especially the shorter plants. In the design, it looks like some of these plants, like the lead plant, will need more spacing between plants. But that's not really true because it grows from a taproot and isn't bushy at the base. Even a lot of the tall plants grow from small crowns or roots. And if you want your garden to fill in, you need plants close together. If you leave too much space between plants, you'll have a sea of mulch that takes many years to fill in. Sometimes people worry about planting things too close together, but usually the issue is when you choose plants that are too tall or bushy. I'd suggest using your design to focus on heights and not so much about spacing. And then when you actually plant the garden, plant everything about 1 foot apart. If you try to portray the actual 1 foot spacing in the design, it gets way too crowded visually. If fitting plants in the grid gets too confusing, you can always delete it. In real life though, if you've paid close attention to plant heights, they'll fit nicely together, just like a native prairie or woodland. If you want to add text to a design, click on the text box icon, draw a rectangle, and then you can add any text you'd like. You can make it bigger or smaller by clicking on the text size here. To print or save a copy of your design, go to File, Download, and then you can either click on the JPEG or PNG. Both of these are image files. I like to do PNG because it's a little bit better quality. You can also save it as a PDF, but it will save the entire slideshow. This will save a copy of your design in your Downloads file. You can get to it in most browsers by clicking on the download icon, and it'll open it on your computer, and then from there you can print it off. If you don't have a color printer, I recommend going to your library and printing them off there. Another tip is to put your design in one of those plastic sleeves that come in 3-ring binders. That way, when you're planting the garden, your design doesn't get wet and muddy. When you're all finished, you can check out our native plant store at blazingstargardens.com and pre-order plants for May shipping or pickup. We have pickup locations at our Owatonna, Minnesota greenhouse, as well as a few Twin Cities plant sales. If you share your designs on social media, be sure to tag us at Blazing Star Gardens. Of course, I wasn't able to show you all of the features in this design tool, but this should get you started. If you want to learn more about designing gardens, I'd recommend going to our website and reading through our plant descriptions and installation guide. Thanks for watching, and happy planting!